Joining me today is Mark J. Carter. We're going to dive into the work that he does in helping entrepreneurs tell their story. And we're first going to hear a bit about his story, about where he got and how he got here. He's a podcaster. And let's jump into it. Mark,
Yeah.
welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Dean. I appreciate it.
Hey, I am really curious. You have a unique podcast. You have a unique approach. Kind of your super skill is really this interviewing skill. So I'm excited for just our time together today. But tell me about your journey of where, how, and where you've gotten to when it comes to helping people with their stories and
Mhm.
some of the work that you're doing there.
Jeez, the short version of a very long story, and I'll date myself with the story. When I was a senior in college in 1999, I read a Tony Robbins book, wanted to be Tony Robbins. Did not turn out that way, but that's what I wanted and thought at the time. And I just naturally figured it was in my DNA. It's like if you want to be successful, surround yourself with and learn from successful people. So, and I found my first notebook when I wrote my book, Idea Climbing How to Build a Support System for Your Next Big Idea. My first notebook was from February of 1999 with my first two interviews. I went on a bender that continues today. And the difference in hindsight, I didn't know I was doing it intentionally at the time, but sometimes I would have, a CEO pick the person I've interviewed them, but I would only have like 20 to 30 minutes on the phone at the time or 20 to 30 minutes over coffee. So I didn't have time for, I call it daytime fluff. Let's spend 15 minutes talking about your childhood. I had to get to the meat. My goal was one actionable idea to change my life and or build my business that they did to become successful. So I got really good at pulling out the stories, the passion, the purpose, the how to do something. 2012 launched a YouTube station. Didn't want to do it, but the guy I was interviewing in the meetings in the event industry said, "You're in this with me, kid." 5 minutes before I started recording, I'm like, "I guess I'm in this with you." So sporadically over the years, I put up interviews on YouTube. Then that turned into a podcast, audio only. The last like 20 episodes or so, I'm on 107 now. Turned into video, and then every other week a radio show. But it all stems from a genuine curiosity of not just tell me your story, but how did you start a business? How did you form a multi-platinum rock band? How did you become CEO of a Fortune 100 company? Whatever it might be, it was always about how did you do something? And that's to this day and always will be the focus of my interviews.
So on that question, I'm curious. You've had hundreds of these types of conversations, and you're trying to understand from them how they did this. Do people usually know? Like, there's something in the essence of how they went about doing it, and a lot of times we end up seeing the success we have at the end. But how clearly do people able are they able to explain how they got where they are?
That is an excellent question. And the answer is, and I still remember even in my 20s, I'd say reserved realistic number, at least 40% of the time, unconscious competence comes to the surface. And even in my 20s, I would have mentioned, oh, those are the 3 steps I take for sales. Oh, cool. I'm just going to do more of that intentionally now. A lot of people have unconscious competence. And because of my format, how did you, and learning how to ask the right questions to draw out the stories, at least 40%, 50% of the time, it comes out to them going, oh, that's what I do. Because so many people, it's like the top salesperson in a Fortune 100 company or a multi-million dollar startup. They might be amazing at sales, but they can't tell you what the heck they're doing to close 1 million in sales a year. And that's part of what I pull out of them in the interviews.
So you find that at the end of the interview, they have more awareness of themselves and their journey than even before they started.
Very often, yes, definitely.
Is that part of what separates decent interviewers from exceptional interviewers? I mean, in your experience, what separates exceptional interviewers from most interviewers?
As far as in the podcast and well, radio being video and audio, a lot of the people out there, and if it works for them, great. But it becomes the Mark J. Carter show with trickles of the guest Dean. I think the good interviewers make it all about the guest. That people are tuning in because they want to learn from, Dean, John, Sarah, Marty, whoever it might be. And I think the great, phenomenal interviewers draw stories out of their guests and make it about them and make it about a learning experience. They don't make it all about 5 minutes of their opinion, one question, 2 minutes from the guest, 5 minutes of their opinion, one question, 2 minutes from the guest. It's all about the guest. 80 to 90% of the conversation is the guest, but they drive it by doing what you're doing. You're eliciting stories. That's another thing that makes it great is they're not asking the yes or no questions. Do you like what you do for business? That's yes or no. They're asking questions that are going to elicit a story that people want to listen to, which makes them more popular, which makes their show more popular. And when you focus on the guest, I think everyone wins.
So let's look at our audience here. So NSA Illinois, we are made up of people who are speakers, some of them keynote speakers. We have trainers, people that do work in group settings. We have coaches. We have a variety of people that are really aimed at some sort of transformation of their audience. What are some of the lessons that you've learned from your interviewing work that can really apply to the work that people do as speakers and trainers in that world?
I think it's involving, and I'm seeing this more, it's happening because of one comedian, Matt Rife. I'm noticing, at least on TikTok, other comedians are doing what they call crowd work. And they're engaging the crowd. It's off the cuff. It makes it funny. It's in the moment. And looking at recent videos, whether it's TikTok or YouTube of speakers, I'm starting to notice that they're engaging with the audience and they're making it a conversation, not just a blocked out 50-minute speech with no interaction whatsoever. And I think that audience engagement and even asking questions of the audience, even if it's something as simple as raise your hand or can you relate, it makes them think. And I think it makes them relate more to the speaker. Oh, so yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, I do know. I don't know how to solve that problem. Or, oh, thanks. Yeah, I do know how to solve that problem. So I think some crowd work makes a big difference in asking questions of the audience and getting them to get in good rapport with you can make a world of difference.
Well, and for that's a great point because I think the speaking world and people's expectations have continued to evolve as you would expect over the last 20 years. From to your point, the Tony Robbins style. I listened to the CDs and he was kind of this icon model when we think of that type of speaking. The Zig Ziglars, the classic on stage to the audience, and then it seemed like TED Talks had a big influence on the style that
Mm-hmm.
people were presenting and what we were expecting. And now what you're highlighting is more immersive, more
Yeah.
interactive, more real. Not that doesn't mean not prepared, but
Oh, yeah.
uh, less canned maybe. And that means as a speaker, we have to get probably a lot more comfortable with the spontaneity, with the being in the moment, knowing when to move away from what I prepared to being present and getting back on track. What do you see as those key skills if I want to move my approach to the audience more into that? What are some of the skills that I have to maybe work on honing?
Well, one of them is being comfortable being uncomfortable. And part of it is, and this is, I think, a lot of the keynote speakers, even if they are still doing mostly 50-minute presentations, they know their stuff. So by involving the audience, they're going to come up with an answer tailored to the audience that they have a question about that makes it much more relevant to the audience. But I think you really have to know your stuff to open it up and be comfortable being uncomfortable. And by asking questions and engaging them, it's going to shift your speech. But I know one of the patterns that a lot of keynote speakers that I admire have is they don't have literally a 50-minute block of check, 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 check. They have a 50-minute block of 10 blocks of 5 minutes that they can interchange if they need to. And I think that also helps when it's not just the stump speech of 55 minutes and this is it. It's, oh, there's 10 snippets, which means I can pull 5 minutes out and put 5 minutes in based on what the audience just asked me or the way the audience just responded. So they're thinking quicker on their feet, but if they really know their stuff, I think that's also going to resonate with the audience. Wow, he or she is really amazing at networking or whatever it might be. So I think that's a big part of it is being comfortable, being uncomfortable, at least for a few minutes during the time.
It's kind of saying, okay, we're going to go out without a net here for a while, right? And we don't know what's
Yep.
going to happen. And and I think to that point, the audience admires that in general. I mean, we expect the audience wants the presenter to be successful. We want to have a good experience. We generally don't have hecklers in the audience. I mean, they can pop up, but people want to have a good time. They want to be engaged, and they're rooting for the presenter. And so that means for us with the microphone, being able to step out into that, and certainly it's much more helpful if you have deep expertise in that area. You mentioned the unconscious competence that I can rely on, and also speaks to the importance of us being deep experts in some areas rather than kind of treading into some areas that maybe we don't have the expertise. I would expect anxiety is going to be a lot higher for the presenter if they're thinking, okay, I've got enough to get through this, but I hope nobody asks me a question that takes me into water that I can't swim in.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see, our area of core expertise versus dabbling out into some of the broader areas that we might be invited into playing out for this?
I think people want core expertise. They want niche. They want a deep well of knowledge. They want a little bit of, like we said, interaction with the audience. But I think these days, and with the exception of the opening keynote and closing keynote, the opening keynotes to get everyone riled up and good, and that there's a need for that. Get the energy up, bring it up, get the audience in a good headspace. Closing, end strong. I mean, that might be purely motivational, and that fits in that scenario. As far as everything in between, if you're talking about a conference, I think people want niche knowledge. They want to know about sales in the B2B services industry, not just, woo, here's how to close a sale. Well, what if I'm in pharmaceutical sales, but the guy next to me is a consultant, the woman on the other side is starting her own business. They want some kind of niche expertise that they can talk to or speak to and learn from the speaker from that niche.
Mm. Now, you've mastered an area of audio and video communication here, and for a lot of the audience, we've maybe toyed with the idea, or they've experimented with it, or just had a lot of people say things like, you should have a podcast, or you should have a YouTube channel. What's your take on the role of media like that for speakers and trainers and coaches?
I think it helps people get to know you. It moves you along the know, like, and trust spectrum faster. They can get an idea for you and your style. Even if you're interviewing, there's still an energy involved. Are you a high energy interviewer? Are you a very serious interviewer? And the biggest part about podcasting, the radio show, anything else, is that I think and I believe that podcasting is an amazing networking tool. You can showcase the genius of your network. If you have a big list and people like you, they're going to probably like your guests. So you have a chance to showcase other people's genius, which helps them. And if you don't have, the big list, or you're still building your network or constantly building your network, you can meet people as podcast guests that you would never meet otherwise. I have so many stories of people I met that the only reason I met them was he wants to do a podcast about people who have started and run successful networking groups. That led to me being involved in a networking group, which led to a coaching club, which led to referrals. But if I didn't have that podcast and I wasn't inviting people for niche topics, I never would have met that guy and so many other people that I met. So I think that's one thing people miss. It's not just about the downloads and views. It is about them, but it's also, look who you can get to meet. Look how many people are going to say yes to being on a podcast. Look how much you can learn. I mean, if you want to get better at speaking, either do a podcast about it or intersperse different segments about it in different interviews, and interview people about how to become a better public speaker. It's like an MBA. You get to learn from them and you get to showcase their genius with your audience, and your audience will probably grow because they're going to come back again and again, because it's not just you talking into a camera again. It's you with a guest they might not have heard of. Or if
Mm.
they heard of, they haven't heard you interview them. So they're going to tune in for that. So I think it's an amazing networking tool. And I think it's an amazing relationship marketing tool, not just how many downloads can I get, because that can be daunting. If the only thing you're going for is I need X number of downloads to get sponsorship, that can be a daunting task. If it's networking,
Mhm.
the effects can start to resonate right out of the gates with your first, second, third, fourth, fifth guest, meeting people you never would meet without a podcast.
Well, that's a great recalibration, even of expectation for somebody, and why, what is success if I'm going to put the effort into it, because it does take effort, and recognizing that I've seen that same thing. Like you get to interact with and have deep conversations with people that otherwise, if you just said, "Hey, I'd like to chat with you for 15 minutes sometime," they'd say, yeah, I don't really have time for that. But if there's going to be an audience, you get to have a conversation that you wouldn't otherwise have.
Mhm.
So that's a really key point. Now, what about on the other side, the other set of the other microphone? If I'm a speaker and I want to go out and be guest on podcasts, any advice for people that maybe they don't want to start their own podcast, but they want to go out and be guests on podcasts?
Yes, be willing to be a little bit vulnerable, share your failures and your successes. They can be intertwined. Here's why my first business failed, but then I bounced back, and here's what I did with my second one. And definitely try to share stories. Never answer yes or no or just one sentence answer. Share a story with the audience because everyone loves to hear stories and they learn from stories. And realize, and always, if you can, do a prep call, or even before you hit record. If there's not time for a prep call, busy people don't have time for that. But before you hit record, ask the interviewer, what do you want to get out of this? What does your audience want to hear? By the way, kind of like what we did. Here's a few things we could talk about, but it's your audience. What do you think they want to hear? Here's my quick story. Now break it apart and ask them what you want. Something like that's invaluable than going in cold. You might tell a story that has nothing to do with the audience of the podcaster, and the podcaster knows his or her audience. So definitely ask them, what does your audience want to hear? Here's a few options. Not just here's one. I speak on conflict resolution. We're only going to talk about that. Well, if the podcaster is talking about building a speaking career, maybe that story would have been more relevant. It has technically nothing to do with conflict resolution. So ask the podcast interviewer what their audience wants to hear and give them a few options to choose from, and you're going to have a much more successful interview.
It is interesting how wide ranging. You've got some guests, in my experience, in previous interview work that I've done, where they'll send over like, here's a list of questions that we'd like you to select from, and okay, I'll look it over, and there's a couple that that might be interesting. But the risk, is that when you ask that question, it puts a nickel into the machine, and out comes kind of this prepared, curated story, which just ends up not being nearly as engaging as if we're out here on the high wire together, figuring out how this is going to work. So,
Yep.
whole wide range of approaches that people have. Others say, "Hey, we'll go wherever you want to go. Let's just have a good time."
Those are my favorite ones.
That's cool. Um, what? So you've done some really interesting work. What have you seen for you that's been helpful as far as community? Any of us that are speakers, podcasters, trainers, whatever it is, it's a bit of a solo endeavor. You're a part of NSA Illinois. You're perhaps part of other organizations. What's the role that you see affiliating with organizations playing for you in your journey?
It's being surrounded with, and we'll talk about NSA Illinois. It's being surrounded with people who, out of the gates, before you even say hello, probably understand you. They're going through the same things, they're having the same highs and lows. That camaraderie alone is like, oh, thank God you get me. And when you want to grow, I mean, NSA Illinois has phenomenal programming because it's geared towards that group of people with that camaraderie. And it's learning from your peers. Sometimes it's just venting to your peers. It could be sharing success with your peers. But I think that's the biggest part of me, at least for me, is that I'm in a room with people virtually or in person. They get me. That I
Mm,
might be able to help them if I'm a little further along. If it's something like podcasting and interviewing, they might be able to help me if it's something that they're further along with, like getting on stage, things like that. That camaraderie alone, oh my God, is worth the price of admission. It's
yeah.
just this feeling of, oh, thank God, it's my tribe.
Hmm. That's a great word, camaraderie, right? I mean,
Yeah.
uh, there's long drives and there's lonely days, and so having people that, like you said, get it, can be really powerful. And I find myself periodically, reaching out to people just for encouragement. How you doing? Haven't talked to you for a while. What's going on? And I think that's an important thing for us in this community to be able to do. So, Mark, this has been really insightful and fascinating. If people want to learn more about the work that you're doing, so tell us about your podcast, where they should go, or any way that you'd like them to connect with you. What should we know?
The number one way I'd love people to connect with me is my YouTube station. So subscribe. I'm doing at least one interview a week, sometimes two now. And you can just go to markjcartertv.com. That's markjcartertv.com. It'll take you, boom, right to YouTube. You don't even have to search for it. As far as anything I'm doing, the media to guest appearances, radio on down, that's markjcarter.com under the tab Idea Climbing Media. Again, that's markjcarter.com under the tab Idea Climbing Media. Those are the two places I'd love to connect with you.
Awesome. It's been fun doing some idea climbing here today, Mark. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, Dean.
Take care.
You too.